The cake box felt heavy in my hands. Not because of its weight, but because of the hope packed inside it. It was a chocolate lava cake. Ethan's favorite. I'd spent the entire afternoon baking it, making sure the gooey center was just right. It was his birthday, and I wanted everything to be perfect. The night air in Maple Creek was crisp, carrying the woody scent of late autumn. Streetlights cast long, lonely shadows on the pavement. I walked the last few feet to his house, my heart thumping with a happy, secret excitement. I didn't bother knocking. We had been together for 2 years. His house was as much my home as my own. I turned the familiar brass knob, expecting to step into the quiet dark and surprise him. But there was a soft light coming from the living room, a warm, flickering glow, and music. A slow, gentle song I didn't recognize. My plan to surprise him was ruined, but I smiled anyway. Maybe he was just relaxing, waiting for me. I crept closer, peering through the gap between the door and its frame. The fireplace was lit, and in front of it, on the sheepskin rug we had bought together last winter, were 2 figures. One was Ethan. The other was a woman. She was in his arms. Her back was to me, but I could see her long, dark hair spilling over his shoulder. I saw the way his hands held her, with a certainty that made my stomach clench. Then, he dipped his head, and she tilted hers up. They kissed. It wasn't a small, friendly kiss. It was the kind of kiss that erases everything else in the world. The kind of kiss he used to give me. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers went numb. The white cardboard box slipped from my grasp. It hit the wooden floor of the porch with a soft, sickening thud. The sound was nothing, a whisper in the night, but to me, it was as loud as a gunshot. The cake, my perfect, love-filled cake, was ruined, just like everything else. I stood there, frozen in the cold night air, watching the perfect life I thought I had shatter into a million pieces right before my eyes. But that was the end. To understand the end, you have to know the beginning. You have to know how perfect it all was. Just 1 week before, my world was painted in shades of gold and amber. Autumn had settled over Maple Creek, and my little shop, Clara's Closet, was a haven of warmth and color. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful little sound that I associated with happiness. I was steaming a new cashmere scarf. Its soft gray fabric felt like a cloud in my hands. The shop smelled of lavender sachets and old books, a scent I had curated myself. This place was my dream, built from scratch with late nights, careful savings, and a love for fashion that ran bone deep. The bell chimed again, but this time I didn't need to look up. I knew the sound of his footsteps. I come bearing gifts. Ethan's voice was a low, smooth melody that always made me smile. I turned around. He stood there, leaning against the doorframe, a vision in a tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows. He was holding 2 cups of coffee from the daily grind, our favorite spot. His dark hair was a little messy from the wind, and his eyes, the color of warm honey, were fixed on me. That look, it was a look that said, "You are my entire world." "A pumpkin spice latte?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You know me too well, Mr. Hayes. It's my job to know you," he said, walking over to the counter. He set the cups down and wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me close. He smelled of coffee, old paper, and the crisp autumn air. He smelled like home. "How's the most beautiful shop owner in Maple Creek doing today?" "Busy," I murmured, leaning into his chest. "Mrs. Gable was just in. She bought that green coat she's been eyeing for a month. Said she needed to look her best for the town's fall festival." "Of course. She did." He chuckled. "She'll probably spend the whole time telling everyone what a perfect couple we are." He wasn't wrong. In Maple Creek, we were the golden couple. The talented, independent shop owner and the brilliant, beloved high school math teacher. We were the storybook romance everyone in our small town loved to watch. 2 years of stolen kisses behind the bleachers of football games, of slow dancing in his living room, of building a life that felt as comfortable and perfect as a well-worn sweater. He was my anchor, my quiet harbor in a world that could sometimes feel too loud. With him, I felt safe. I felt seen. Speaking of perfect couples, my mother's voice cut through our quiet moment. She had let herself in, as she always did, carrying a bag of groceries. Helen was a woman carved from worry and love. Her husband, my father, had passed away when I was in college, and since then, her entire world revolved around me. Ethan, Dear. How lovely to see you, she said, her eyes lighting up. She adored him. Every mother in town adored him. You too, Helen, he said, releasing me to give her a polite hug. I was just telling Clara. She began, placing her bag on the counter and immediately starting to rearrange a stack of folded sweaters. That it's about time you two made things official. The whole town is waiting for a wedding. When are you going to make me a grandmother? Ethan. I'm not getting any younger. I sighed. It was her favorite topic. Mom. Please. I'm just saying what everyone is thinking, she said, waving a dismissive hand. A handsome, stable man like Ethan. You can't let him get away. Clara. A girl needs security. I have security, I said, a little more sharply than I intended. I have the shop. I have myself. Ethan squeezed my hand gently. A silent signal of support. We're happy where we are, Helen. There's no rush. He was always so good at handling her. So calm and diplomatic. He understood my need for independence, my pride in what I had built. He never pushed. He just loved me. At least, that's what I believed. My mother huffed but let the subject drop, turning her attention to criticizing the placement of a mannequin instead. We fell into the easy rhythm of our afternoon. Ethan helped me with some inventory. His methodical, mathematical mind a perfect balance to my creative chaos. My mother fussed over everything. It was normal. It was our life. A life so full of simple joys and deep-seated love that I never thought it could break. I was so blissfully, foolishly happy. The first crack in that perfect facade appeared 2 days later. It was so small I almost missed it. We were having dinner at my place. A simple pasta dish I'd thrown together. We were talking about our day, laughing about a funny story involving one of his students and a protractor. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and for a fraction of a second, his smile faltered. It was a flicker of something I couldn't name. Annoyance. Panic. He quickly picked it up, turning the screen away from me. Sorry. I have to take this, he said, his voice suddenly all business. He stood up and walked into the other room. It was unusual. Ethan rarely took calls during our dinners. I could hear his muffled voice from the hallway, low and serious. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was different. It wasn't the warm, patient tone of his teacher voice, or the teasing, affectionate tone he used with me. It was guarded. When he came back, he was smiling again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Everything okay? I asked, swirling pasta around my fork. Yeah, just a colleague. A question about the curriculum for next week, he said, a little too quickly. He sat down and changed the subject immediately. So, about the fall festival. Did you decide which dress you're going to wear? You should wear the blue one. It makes your eyes look like the ocean. I let it go. Why wouldn't I? He was Ethan. My Ethan. The man who remembered my favorite coffee order. The color of the dress I wore on our first date. The name of my childhood dog. He had never given me a single reason to doubt him. So I pushed the strange feeling down, chalking it up to my own imagination. But the cracks started to multiply. The next evening, he was scrolling through his phone, and I leaned over to see what he was laughing at. He flinched, angling the phone away instinctively before relaxing and showing me a silly cat video. The movement was tiny, almost imperceptible, but it felt like a door slamming shut in my face. Then came the text messages at odd hours, followed by the excuse that it was just his brother, or a student's parent. He started seeming distant, even when he was sitting right next to me, holding my hand. I would sometimes look over and see a faraway look in his eyes, as if his mind was a million miles away. I started to feel a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I hated it. I hated being the kind of woman who felt insecure, who second-guessed the man she loved. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was letting my mother's pressure get to me. He still said all the right things. He still brought me flowers and told me I was beautiful. He was still, on the surface, the perfect boyfriend. It was during a quiet walk by the creek, the day before his birthday, that he finally gave the uneasy name. Isabel is back in town, he said, his voice carefully casual. He tossed a flat stone and watched it skip across the water's surface. The name hung in the air between us. Isabel, his college girlfriend, the one he had loved before me, the one he rarely spoke of. Oh, I tried to sound just as casual. What's she doing back here? Just visiting her parents, I guess. We ran into each other at the bookstore yesterday. He didn't look at me. He was focused on finding another perfect skipping stone. It was strange seeing her after all this time. I'm sure it was, I said softly. A cold feeling washed over me. Despite the warmth of my sweater, he finally turned to me, and he must have seen the worry on my face. He stepped closer and took my hands in his. They were warm and steady. Hey, he said, his voice gentle again. It's nothing. Okay. She's the past. You're my present. You're my future. Don't you ever doubt that. He leaned in and kissed me. It was a sweet, reassuring kiss. And like a fool, I let it wash all my fears away. I chose to believe him. I chose to believe in us. I decided right then and there that I would stop being silly. I would plan the most wonderful birthday surprise for him. I would bake his favorite cake and show him, through my love and trust, that he was my entire world. I wanted to prove that our foundation was solid rock, not shifting sand. I wanted to erase the tiny cracks that had appeared in my perfect world. I had no idea I was just plastering over a fault line that was about to rupture and swallow me whole. His words were a balm on my frayed nerves. You're my future. I clung to that sentence like a lifeline. In the bright light of the next day, his birthday, the shadows of doubt seemed foolish. I was being ridiculous, letting the return of an old girlfriend rattle a 2-year relationship built on trust and love. My mind was playing tricks on me, turning small, insignificant moments into mountains of suspicion. I decided to bury those feelings deep and focus on what was real, my love for Ethan. The day was dedicated to him. I closed the shop early, hanging a small, handwritten sign on the door that read, "Closed for a special occasion." The afternoon sun streamed into my kitchen as I gathered the ingredients for his cake. Flour, dark cocoa powder, sugar, eggs. Simple things that, when combined with care, could become something magical. As I sifted the flour, watching the fine white powder fall like snow into the bowl, I thought about how our relationship was like that. Two separate lives, mixed together with time and affection, creating something rich and wonderful. The scent of melting chocolate filled the air, a deep, decadent aroma that was pure comfort. I worked methodically, my hands moving with a practiced ease. Every step was an act of love, whisking the eggs until they were pale and frothy, folding in the melted butter, pouring the dark, glossy batter into the pans. This cake was more than just a dessert. It was a reassurance, both for him and for myself. It was my way of saying, see, we're fine. Everything is perfect. While the cakes were in the oven, I wrapped his gift. I had found it weeks ago in an old antique shop 2 towns over. It was a beautiful, leather-bound first edition of his favorite book, The Great Gatsby. It was a silly, extravagant gift, but I knew he would appreciate the history of it, the feel of the old pages in his hands. I tied the ribbon carefully, my heart swelling with anticipation. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face. My phone rang, and I saw my mother's name on the screen. I answered, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I started on the frosting. Just calling to see if you've wished the birthday boy a happy day, she said, her voice cheerful. Of course. I did. Mom, I'm baking his cake right now. Oh, that's my girl. A good man like Ethan deserves to be spoiled, and you're lucky to have him. Clara, remember that. A man that handsome and reliable doesn't stay single for long. I know. Mom, I said, a little tired of the familiar lecture. I'm not trying to let him get away. Good. Just don't do anything to push him away, she added, a note of warning in her voice. Don't be too independent. Men like to feel needed. I bit my tongue to stop myself from starting an argument. I knew she meant well. I have to go. Mom, the cakes will burn. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I hung up, a small sigh escaping my lips. Don't push him away. The words echoed in my head. Was that what I was doing by feeling insecure? By questioning him? I shook my head, dismissing the thought. Tonight would be perfect. I would give him his gift. We would eat the cake. And all these foolish, fleeting doubts would melt away like the chocolate center of a lava cake. By the time evening fell, everything was ready. The cake was cooled, resting in its simple white box. His gift was in my tote bag. I changed into a soft, blue sweater, his favorite color, on me, and touched up my makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were bright with excitement. I looked happy. I looked like a woman who was deeply, truly in love. A woman who had absolutely no idea her world was about to end. The walk to his house was filled with a joyful nervousness. I imagined his surprise, his smile, the way he would pull me into a hug and tell me I was amazing. I replayed the scene in my head a dozen times. Each time, it ended with us laughing, with the reassurance of his arms around me. And then I was there, standing on his porch, seeing the flickering light from the fireplace, hearing the soft, unfamiliar music. I peeked through the doorway, my perfect surprise turning into a perfect nightmare. Ethan and Isabel kissing. The cake box dropped from my hands. The sound was so small, but it cracked the night open. My body went into a strange state of shock. The world didn't speed up. It slowed down. I could see every detail. The way the firelight caught the red highlights in her hair. The contented look on Ethan's face. The way his hand rested possessively on the small of her back. My hand started to shake. But a cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. I wasn't thinking. I was just acting. My fingers, clumsy and numb, fumbled for my phone in my bag. I raised it. The screen a bright, intrusive rectangle in the dark. My thumb found the camera icon. I took a picture. Then another. The shutter sound was off, but I imagined I could hear it. Click. Click. The sound of my heart breaking. The sound of my illusions being captured in pixels. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe some part of me knew I would need proof. That my own memory wouldn't be enough to convince me this was real. That he would try to lie his way out of it. Then I turned and walked away. I left the crushed cake box on his porch. A pathetic monument to my shattered love. My feet moved one in front of the other. But I couldn't feel the ground. The familiar streets of Maple Creek. The cozy houses with their warm lights. All seemed alien. I was a ghost walking through a town that was no longer mine. I felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on my couch in the dark, the silence pressing in on me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The pain was too big for tears. It was a hollow ache in the center of my chest. A vast, empty space where my heart used to be. I just sat there, clutching my phone, staring at the pictures I had taken. The proof. The undeniable, soul-crushing proof. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Each second a hammer blow against the silence. Around 10 o'clock, I heard his key in the lock. The sound made my stomach lurch. The door opened, and he stepped inside, flicking on the lights. He was smiling. "There you are," he said, his voice full of warmth. "I was wondering where you'd gone. Happy birthday to me." He walked over, holding a small, beautifully wrapped box. "I know it's my birthday, but I saw this and thought of you." He was still playing the part. The perfect, thoughtful boyfriend. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at his handsome, lying face. "Clara. Honey. What's wrong?" His smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. He reached out to touch my arm. I flinched away from him as if his hand were fire. "Don't," I said. My voice was a stranger's voice. It was flat, dead, empty of all emotion. "What's going on? You're scaring me." I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up my phone from the cushion beside me. I opened the gallery, found the first picture, and slid the phone across the coffee table. It stopped right in front of him. He looked down. I watched his face. I watched the color drain from it. I watched the fake concern curdle into shock, then into the cornered look of a liar who's been caught. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at the screen, at the image of him and Isabel locked in an embrace. "Clara," he finally managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. This isn't what it looks like." A dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. It was a terrible sound. "Isn't what it looks like?" I finally met his eyes. My gaze felt like ice. "It looks like you're kissing your ex-girlfriend. On your birthday. In the house we were supposed to build a life in. What part of that am I getting wrong?" "Ethan. It was a mistake," he pleaded, his eyes wide. He stood up, pacing back and forth. "It just happened." She was emotional, talking about the past. "It didn't mean anything. I swear." "Didn't mean anything?" I said, my voice rising, the numbness finally cracking to reveal the raw agony beneath. The last week, the secret phone calls, the distant looks, the lies. Did any of that mean anything? Or was it all just a game? "No. Of course not. I love you. Clara. You have to believe me." This has nothing to do with you and me. That was the line that did it. That was the moment the last shred of hope died. He was trying to separate his betrayal from our love, as if he could keep one pristine while dirtying the other. He didn't get it. He had taken the beautiful, perfect thing we had built and set it on fire. I stood up, my body feeling heavy. Ancient. Get out, I said. The words were quiet, but they held the weight of a final judgment. What? No. Clara. Let's just talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said, looking straight through him. The man I thought I loved wouldn't do this. He wouldn't lie to my face and then offer me a gift. I don't know who you are, but I want you out of my house. Now. He stared at me, seeing the unbending resolve in my eyes for the first time. The perfect illusion was gone. The storybook romance was over. All that was left was the ugly, brutal truth, lying between us like the wreckage of a car crash. The golden couple of Maple Creek was finished, and my world, once so full of color, had just faded to black and white. He left. After a few more pathetic, stumbling attempts to explain the unexplainable, he finally gathered his things and walked out of my apartment, and out of my life. The click of the door closing behind him was the most final sound I had ever heard. I stood in the middle of my living room, the brightly lit space suddenly feeling vast and empty. The little gift box he brought was still on the coffee table, its cheerful wrapping a cruel mockery. I picked it up, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash can without even looking inside. It landed with a soft thud on top of yesterday's coffee grounds. The night that followed was a blur of hollow-eyed misery. I didn't sleep. I just wandered from room to room, a ghost in my own home, touching the edges of the life we had shared. The photograph of us on the mantelpiece, smiling on a sunny day at the lake. The soft throw blanket on the couch where we used to cuddle and watch movies. Every object was a memory, and every memory was now tainted, poisoned by the image of him with her. The first sob tore its way out of my chest around 3 a.m. It was a raw, animal sound of pure pain. Once I started crying, I couldn't stop. I collapsed onto the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, and wept until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. I cried for the 2 years I had given him, for the future I had so carefully planned, for the woman I was just yesterday so full of love and naive trust. That woman was gone. He had killed her. The next morning, the sun rose with an infuriating cheerfulness. I forced myself out of bed, my body aching as if I'd been in a physical fight. Looking in the mirror was a shock. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, a puffy, red-eyed creature with dark circles and dull, lifeless hair. The pain of the night was written all over my face. And then the text started. A barrage of them. From him. Clara, please just talk to me. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Don't throw away what we have over this. Please. Each message was a small, digital knife twisting in the wound. I read them with a cold, detached feeling. His words of love and regret now sounded like nothing more than the desperate manipulations of a liar. I blocked his number without a second thought. But I couldn't block out the town. Maple Creek was small, and news or at least gossip traveled faster than the speed of light. I knew I couldn't hide in my apartment forever. I had a business to run. So I put on the biggest pair of sunglasses I owned, threw on a shapeless sweater, and forced myself to walk the few blocks to my shop. The walk was an ordeal. I could feel the eyes on me. Mrs. Gable, watering her petunias, gave me a look of deep, pitying concern. Mr. Henderson from the bakery, who usually greeted me with a booming good morning, sunshine, just gave me a sad, tight-lipped nod. They knew. I didn't know how they knew, but they knew something was wrong. My perfect, public romance had crumbled, and the whole town was watching the fallout. My mother was already at the shop when I arrived. She took one look at my face and her own crumpled. Oh, Clara, honey, what happened? She asked, her voice trembling. The story came out in broken, halting sentences between fresh waves of tears. I told her everything. The cake, the window, the kiss, the lies. I expected sympathy. I expected her to wrap me in her arms and tell me what a monster he was. Instead, she sank onto a velvet stool, her face pale. Oh, dear God, she whispered. Are you sure? Clara, maybe you misunderstood. Misunderstood. My voice was sharp with disbelief. Mom, I saw them. I have pictures. There's nothing to misunderstand. But Ethan, He's such a good man. A good, steady man. She stammered, as if trying to reconcile the image of her perfect future son-in-law with the man I was describing. Men, they make mistakes. Clara. Especially when a woman like that Isabel comes back. All glamorous and worldly. Maybe he was just tempted for a moment. Are you sure you should throw everything away over one little slip? I stared at her, my heart breaking all over again. The one person I thought would be in my corner. And she was making excuses for him. She was more worried about losing the idea of him than about the pain he had inflicted on me. One little slip. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. He cheated on me. Mom. He lied to me for days. That's not a slip. That's a choice. A series of choices. But what will people say? She fretted, her hands twisting in her lap. Everyone loves you together. They'll be talking. They'll be judging. I don't care what people say. I snapped, the anger finally boiling over. I care that the man I was going to marry betrayed me in the worst possible way. Why can't you see that? Our argument was cut short by the chimming of the shop bell. A customer walked in. I quickly wiped my eyes, forced a brittle smile onto my face, and retreated into the back room, leaving my mother to handle the shop. I couldn't face anyone. Her words echoed in my head. Are you sure you should throw everything away? The implication was clear. Maybe this was somehow my fault. Maybe I had pushed him away, just like she'd warned. The seeds of self-doubt she had planted began to sprout in the fertile ground of my grief. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Ethan didn't respect the boundary I had set. Since he couldn't call or text, he started showing up. He came to my apartment, knocking on the door until I turned off all the lights and pretended I wasn't home. He came to the shop, standing outside on the sidewalk, looking in with those sad, puppy dog eyes that used to melt my heart but now just filled me with a cold fury. He was making a public spectacle of his remorse, turning my private pain into a town-wide drama. And the town, for the most part, fell for it. They saw the handsome, heartbroken teacher pining for his lost love. They didn't see the liar. They saw me, the woman who refused to forgive him. And they saw a cold heart. I overheard snippets of conversation at the grocery store. Poor Ethan. He looks just awful. I heard she won't even speak to him. It seems a bit harsh, doesn't it? Well, you know Clara. Always been a bit proud. Each whispered comment was another cut. I was being judged, not for being betrayed, but for how I was handling the betrayal. My pain was an inconvenience to their perfect story of our town's perfect couple. I needed to do something. I couldn't let my life just stop. My shop, my beautiful sanctuary, had started to feel like a cage. The colorful clothes seemed to mock my gray mood. The cheerful bell on the door sounded like a scream. It needed to change. I needed to change it. If I couldn't control my heart, I could at least control my surroundings. I decided to renovate. Not a huge overhaul, just a refresh. A way to reclaim the space as my own. To scrub Ethan's memory from its walls. I wanted a new look. Something stronger. More modern. I needed to tear down the old to build something new. I knew I couldn't do it myself. I remembered a flyer I'd seen pinned to the community board of the coffee shop. Alex Miller. Custom woodwork and design. No job too small. There was a picture of a beautifully crafted bookshelf next to the text. I called the number. A man with a quiet, low voice answered on the second ring. Alex speaking. Hi. My name is Clara. I own Clara's Closet on Main Street. I'm looking to have some new shelving and a new sales counter built. There was a pause. Okay. He said simply. I can come by and take a look this afternoon. If that works for you. Yes. That would be great. He showed up exactly on time. Alex Miller was not what I expected. He was tall and lean, with sawdust in his dark hair and calloused hands that spoke of hard, honest work. He had a quiet intensity about him. His eyes, a startlingly clear shade of blue, took in everything but gave nothing away. He didn't offer a folksy Maple Creek reading or try to make small talk. He just nodded and said, So, what are you thinking? He felt separate from the rest of the town, like an outsider. Even though I knew he'd lived here his whole life, he moved with a quiet confidence, his focus entirely on the space, on the wood and the walls. For the first time in days, I was talking to someone who wasn't looking at me with pity. He was just looking at me like a client. It was a profound relief. I walked him through my ideas, my voice stronger than it had been in days. I wanted to replace the fussy, antique-style counter with something clean and minimalist. made of reclaimed barnwood. I wanted floating shelves that were strong and simple. He listened. Really listened. Occasionally asking a practical question about measurements or materials. He didn't ask why I was suddenly changing everything. He didn't mention Ethan. He didn't mention anything personal at all. His presence was a calm, steadying force in the chaos of my life. I can do this, he said when I was finished, his gaze sweeping over the shop one last time. I'll draw up some designs and get you a quote by tomorrow. And that was it. He nodded again, turned, and left. The bell on the door chimed his exit. For the first time since my world had fallen apart, I felt a tiny, fragile spark of something other than pain. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was something like resolve. I was taking a step. A small, wobbly step. But a step forward nonetheless. I was starting to tear down the old life. I just had to pray I had the strength to build a new one in its place. Alex was as good as his word. The next morning, a neatly sketched design and a detailed quote were waiting in my mail inbox. His plan for the shop was exactly what I had envisioned, but couldn't articulate how strong. Clean lines. A blend of rustic warmth and modern simplicity. It was a design for a new beginning. I hired him on the spot. He started work the following Monday. He worked with a quiet, focused efficiency that was mesmerizing to watch. There was no wasted movement, no idle chatter, just the steady rhythm of his saw, the scrape of sandpaper on wood, the satisfying thud of a hammer. The air in my shop, once filled with the ghosts of my past happiness, was now filled with the clean, earthy scent of fresh-cut pine and the promise of change. He worked mostly in the evenings, after I had closed for the day, to minimize disruption. But our paths would often cross as I was locking up or he was setting up. Our conversations were brief, strictly about the project. I think a darker stain on the counter will make the grain of the wood stand out more, he'd say, holding up to stained sample blocks. You're right. Let's go with that one, I'd reply. There was a comfortable silence between us. Unlike everyone else in Maple Creek, he didn't seem to want anything from me. He didn't want the salacious details of my breakup. He didn't offer unsolicited advice. And he didn't smother me with pity. He just treated me like a person. His respectful distance was the kindest thing anyone had given me in weeks. It gave me space to breathe, to simply exist in my own grief without having to perform for an audience. Ethan, on the other hand, was doing the exact opposite. His campaign to win me back grew more desperate and more public. He left a bouquet of my favorite flowers, white lilies, on the shop doorstep with a note that read, "I'm a fool. Please let me fix this." I threw them in the dumpster behind the shop. The sickly sweet smell of the decaying flowers felt fitting. He started leaving messages with my mother, who would then dutifully relay them to me. Ethan called. He says he can't live without you, Clara. He sounds truly broken. Each message was a little twist of guilt, a little nudge to make me reconsider. I was beginning to feel like I was trapped in a fishbowl, with the entire town pressing their faces against the glass, waiting to see what I would do next. The renovation became my escape. Watching Alex transform the raw lumber into beautiful, functional pieces for my store felt like a metaphor for what I was trying to do with my own life. Take the broken pieces and build something stronger. One evening, I stayed late to reorganize some stock in the back room. Alex was in the main part of the shop, installing the new floating shelves. I could hear the low hum of his drill, and the soft thud of the anchors going into the wall. I was surrounded by boxes of last season's clothes, a tangible representation of the past I needed to clear out. As I sorted through them, I came across a crimson dress. It was the dress I had worn on my first anniversary with Ethan. I remembered the night so clear, live fancy dinner, the way he told me I had never looked more beautiful. My hand trembled as I held the soft fabric. A wave of grief, sharp and sudden, washed over me. My carefully constructed composure crumbled. I sank onto a pile of boxes, burying my face in my hands as a silent sob shook my body. The sound of the drill stopped. A moment later, I heard his quiet footsteps. I looked up, mortified to be caught in such a vulnerable state. Alex was standing in the doorway, a drill in one hand, his face unreadable. He didn't say anything. He didn't rush over or ask if I was okay. He just stood there for a beat, his presence a silent acknowledgement of my pain. Then, he turned and walked back into the main room. A minute later, he returned with a mug of water. He set it down on a box beside me. "Drink this," he said, his voice low and calm. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a gentle command. He then turned and went back to his work. The sound of the drill started up again. A steady, grounding noise that filled the silence. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. He hadn't invaded my space or forced me to talk. He had simply offered a small, practical comfort and then given me the dignity of privacy. I took a shaky sip of the water. It was cool and clean. I took a deep breath, the scent of sawdust filling my lungs. When the tears had subsided, I folded the crimson dress, placed it in a box marked for donation, and stood up. I walked back into the shop, where the new, strong shelves lined the wall, ready to be filled with something new. The annual Maple Creek Fall Festival was the centerpiece of the town's social calendar. It was a weekend of hayrides, craft stalls, a pie baking contest, and a big bonfire in the town square. In previous years, it had been one of my favorite events. Ethan and I would wander through the stalls hand in hand, sharing a bag of cider donuts, his arm a warm, secure weight around my shoulders. This year, the thought of it filled me with dread. It was the ultimate stage for the town's drama. There was no way to avoid it without causing even more talk. My mother was insistent. "You have to go, Clara. If you hide away, people will think you're letting him win. You have to hold your head up high." So, I went. I wore a new outfit from my Chopin sharp, tailored blazer and dark jeans. It was my armor. I felt a little stronger, a little more put together. I walked into the bustling town square, my chin held high, ready to face the whispers and the pitying stares. The festival was in full swing. The air smelled of cinnamon, wood smoke, and caramel apples. Children were laughing, and a local band was playing a cheerful folk song on a makeshift stage. It was all so painfully normal, so achingly familiar. I saw people I knew everywhere. They would smile, a little too brightly, and ask, "How are you, Clara?" in a tone that really meant, "Oh, you poor thing. How are you holding up?" I was navigating my way through the crowd, trying to look as casual and carefree as possible, when I saw him. Ethan. He was standing near the stage, talking to the mayor, and he was with Isabel. She was laughing, her hand resting on his arm in a way that was both casual and possessive. They looked like a couple. The sight was a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. I had known they were together, of course, but seeing it, so publicly, so shamelessly, was another thing entirely. I turned to leave, to escape before they could see me. But it was too late. Ethan's eyes met mine across the crowd. A look of panic crossed his face. He quickly said something to Isabel and started making his way toward me. My heart pounded in my chest. I was trapped. People were starting to notice, their conversations faltering as they turned to watch. This was it, the public confrontation I had been dreading. He reached me, his face a mask of earnest sorrow. "Clara," he said, his voice just loud enough for those around us to hear. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this." He reached for my hand. I instinctively pulled back. "Please," he said, his voice breaking dramatically. "Just give me a chance to make it right. I miss you. Everyone misses us." He gestured vaguely at the crowd, who were now openly staring. "I was a fool, a complete idiot, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting it if you don't give me one more chance." It was a performance, a grand, public declaration designed to make him look like the repentant lover, and me like the unforgiving ice queen. I could feel the collective sigh of the crowd, their romantic hearts swaying to his tune. My mother, who was standing nearby, gave me a desperate, pleading look. "Forgive him," her eyes said. And this spectacle. The pressure was immense. It felt like the entire town was holding its breath, waiting for my response. My throat felt tight. My mind was screaming. A part of me, the part that was tired of fighting, tired of being the town pariah, just wanted to say yes, just to make it all stop. Then, through a gap in the crowd, I saw her. Isabel. She was watching the scene unfold, and on her face was the faintest trace of a smirk, a look of smug, triumphant victory. And in that instant, everything became clear. This wasn't about love or regret. This was about ego. This was a power play. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying to win. Period. He was trying to reclaim his status as a good guy in the town's narrative. And I was just a pawn in his game. A fire ignited in my chest, burning away the fear and the self-doubt. It was a clean, hot flame of pure anger. I looked at Ethan, at his perfectly crafted performance of heartbreak, and I was no longer sad. I was furious. I took a breath, and when I spoke, My voice was clear and steady, ringing out in the sudden silence of the town square. No, I said. The word was simple, but it was a declaration of war. Ethan's face fell. The crowd murmured. No. He repeated, as if he couldn't comprehend the word. No. I said again, louder this time. I will not give you another chance to lie to me. Ethan, I will not be a part of your public apology tour. What you did was not a mistake. It was a betrayal. And I deserve better than that. I held his gaze, refusing to back down. For the first time, I saw something other than fake remorse in his eyes. I saw a flicker of cold, hard anger. The mask had slipped. We are done, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. And I would appreciate it if you would respect that and leave me alone. Without waiting for a response, I turned my back on him, on Isabel, on the shocked and whispering crowd. I held my head high and walked away. My legs were shaking, but my spine felt like steel. I had spoken my truth, not in the shadows, but in the bright, unforgiving light of the town square. It was terrifying, and it was the most liberating thing I had ever done. The battle wasn't over, but I had just won a crucial victory. I had won back myself. Walking away from Ethan felt like breaking the surface of the water, after being held under for too long. I gasped for air I didn't know I'd been missing. The murmuring of the crowd faded behind me, becoming a dull, insignificant buzz. For the first time in weeks, the opinions of others didn't matter. The only voice I could hear was my own, and it was telling me I had done the right thing. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked to my shop. It was closed, of course, but it was my sanctuary. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The half-finished counter and shelves stood like skeletons in the dim light, but the scent of sawdust and wood stain was the smell of progress. It was the smell of my future. I stood in the middle of the floor, my hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, and I let myself feel the quiet triumph of the moment. I hadn't crumbled. I had stood my ground. My mother found me there an hour later. Her face was a storm of conflicting emotions: disappointment, frustration, and a sliver of reluctant pride. "Clara, I can't believe you did that," she said, her voice a tense whisper as if the whole town could still hear us. "You humiliated him. In front of everyone. He humiliated me." I corrected her, my voice firm. "He did that the moment he kissed another woman. What I did was just setting a boundary. Boundaries don't pay the bills," she retorted, her anxiety spilling over. "This is a small town. Reputation is everything. You've made yourself look hard, unforgiving. People will talk. Let them talk," I said, turning to face her fully. "Let them talk about the woman who refused to be treated like a doormat. Maybe it's a story they need to hear." She stared at me, really seeing the change in me for the first time. The tearful, broken girl was gone. In her place was someone she didn't quite recognize. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, shaking her head as she walked out. She didn't understand yet, but I had a feeling that, in time, she would. The fallout from the festival was immediate. My public rejection of Ethan had shattered the town's simple narrative. I was no longer the poor, jilted victim. I was now the difficult, angry woman who had scorned their charming golden boy. Ethan, ever the master of public perception, played his part to perfection. He adopted a look of quiet, noble suffering. He and Isabel started appearing together openly, not as flaunting lovers, but as to old friends finding solace in each other's company after a shared, painful experience. It was a carefully constructed lie, and Maple Creek swallowed it whole. My business began to suffer. The usual friendly faces that popped in to browse and chat were replaced by hesitant glances. Through the window, sales slowed to a trickle. People who had been my customers for years suddenly found reasons to shop elsewhere. It was a quiet, insidious shunning. They were choosing a side, and it wasn't mine. The true declaration of war, however, came a week later. A for-lease sign that had been in the window of the empty storefront directly across the street from mine for months was suddenly taken down. 2 days after that, a large, professionally printed banner went up, "Coming soon, Isabel's Boutique. European fashion for the modern woman." It was a deliberate, calculated attack, a direct challenge. Isabel wasn't just taking my ex-boyfriend. She was coming for my livelihood, my dream. She was going to set up shop right across the street. A constant, gleaming reminder of my failure and her victory. The news hit me like a physical blow. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the banner, a cold dread creeping into my heart. This was Isabel's world. She had money, connections, a master's degree in marketing. I had a small town shop I had built with my own two hands. How could I possibly compete with that? For a moment, the fight went out of me. The thought of giving up, of selling the shop and leaving Maple Creek for good, was a tempting whisper in the back of my mind. That evening, Alex was putting the finishing touches on the new counter. He was sanding the surface, his movements long and smooth. The fine dust caught the light, dancing in the air like fireflies. I was sitting on a stool, staring blankly at the banner across the street. He worked in silence for a while. Then he switched off the sander. The sudden quiet was jarring. "She's trying to get under your skin," he said, not looking at me. He ran his hand over the smooth, finished wood of the counter. "It's working," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to fight this, Alex. She's going to crush me." He finally turned to look at me, his clear blue eyes serious. "You're thinking about it the wrong way," he said. "You're thinking about her. You need to think about you." "What's that supposed to mean? Why did you start this shop?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I love fashion. I love helping people feel beautiful. I wanted to create a space that felt warm and welcoming, where women could find things that made them feel like themselves. "Right," he said, nodding slowly. "Did you do it to compete with some boutique from the city? Or did you do it because it's what you're passionate about?" "Because I'm passionate about it," I said, the words stirring something inside me. "Then that's all that matters," he said simply. "You can't control what she does. You can't control what the town thinks. You can only control what you do. You run your shop. You do what you love. You do it better than anyone else because you care more than anyone else. Let the noise be noise." His words were like a splash of cold, clean water on my face. He was right. I had been so consumed by Ethan, by Isabel, by the town's gossip, that I had lost sight of myself. I had forgotten my own strength. I had forgotten the passion that had fueled me to build this place from nothing. Isabel's boutique wasn't about fashion. It was about revenge. Mine was about love. And in the long run, I had to believe that love was stronger. "Thank you, Alex," I said. And I meant it more than I could say. He just gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod and went back to his work. But Ethan and Isabel weren't just content with business competition. They started a subtle but venomous campaign against my character. Ethan, in his role as the concerned ex, would express his worry for me to mutual acquaintances. "I'm just so worried about Clara," he'd say to Mrs. Gable over the counter at the bakery. "She's been so volatile lately. Not herself at all. I think the breakup has really taken a toll on her emotional stability." The words, coated in a thick layer of fake concern, were poison. He was painting me as unhinged, as emotionally unstable. It was a classic, cruel tactic, designed to discredit me and make my legitimate anger seem like hysteria. The whispers in town shifted from pity to suspicion. Was I unstable? Was I the problem all along? The lowest point came when a longtime customer, a woman I had personally styled for her daughter's wedding, came in to return a dress. "I'm sorry, Clara," she said, avoiding my eyes. "It's just my husband heard some things. He's not comfortable with me shopping here anymore." "Things?" I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. "What things?" "Just that you've been having a difficult time. That you're not, well," she stammered, unable to finish. The implication hung in the air between us, ugly and suffocating. She believed him. She believed the lies. She was looking at me not as a person, but as a liability. As a crazy ex-girlfriend it was better to avoid. I processed her refund, my hands shaking. When she left, I had to lock the door and retreat to the back room, gasping for breath, feeling the walls of my own shop closing in on me. This wasn't just a breakup anymore. This was a systematic attempt to destroy me. They were attacking my business, my reputation, my sanity. They wanted to erase me from the town that I loved, to leave me with nothing. I realized then that I was in a fight for my life, not my physical life, but the life I had so carefully and lovingly built. And I had no idea if I had what it took to win. The feeling of being under siege was suffocating. Every time the bell on my shop door chimed, my stomach would clench, wondering if it was a customer or someone coming in to deliver another dose of secondhand gossip. My safe haven had become a battlefield, and I felt exposed and alone. The lies Ethan was spreading were insidious. They were whispers and concerned looks, Impossible to fight head-on. How do you defend yourself against an enemy who claims he's only worried about you? Across the street, Isabel's boutique was taking shape with alarming speed. A team of professional contractors swarmed the place, and a chic, minimalist sign in glossy black letters was installed. It looked expensive, intimidating, and completely out of place in our cozy little town. It was a clear statement of superiority. I found myself retreating further into myself. My conversations with Alex became my only real source of comfort. He had finished the major construction, and the shop looked incredible. The warm, reclaimed wood and strong, simple shelves gave the space a feeling of grounded resilience. It looked the way I wanted to feel. Now, he was just coming by in the evenings to apply the final coats of varnish and install some custom light fixtures he designed. One evening, he found me staring out the window at the brightly lit boutique across the street. They were stocking their shelves with sleek, designer handbags that probably cost more than my entire month's rent. They're going to open next week, I said, my voice flat. Big grand opening party. I saw the invitation at the post office. Everyone in town is invited. Alex came and stood beside me. Not too close, but near enough that I felt his steady presence. He looked across the street, his expression thoughtful. It looks cold, he said after a moment. It looks expensive, I countered. That's what I mean, he said. It's all sharp edges and bright lights. It's a place you go to spend money. Your shop, this is a place you go to feel good. There's a difference. I looked around at my own space. The soft lighting, the cozy reading nook I'd created in one corner, the vintage armchair I'd found at a flea market. He was right. My shop had a heart. Hers had a price tag. The thought gave me a flicker of courage. I still don't know if that's enough, I whispered. It has to be, he said, his gaze meeting mine. It's all you've got. The night of Isabel's grand opening arrived with a chill in the air. The street outside her boutique was lined with cars. Music and laughter spilled out onto the sidewalk every time the door opened. It seemed like the entire town was there. From my own darkened shop, I watched them. I saw Mrs. Gable walk in, dressed in her Sunday best. I saw the mayor shaking hands with Isabel. I saw people I had known my whole life, customers who had shared their stories with me over my sales counter, now clinking champagne glasses and admiring her merchandise. It felt like a public execution of my business. And then I saw Ethan. He was standing by her side. The perfect, supportive partner. He would put his hand on the small of her back, lean in to whisper something in her ear that made her laugh. They were a power couple, holding court. And I was a ghost across the street, a forgotten chapter in his story. The urge to pull down the blinds, to hide from the world, was overwhelming. But Alex's words came back to me. You run your shop. You do what you love. I couldn't control them, but I could control me. Instead of hiding, I turned on every light in my own store. I put on my favorite playlist, a mix of upbeat, soulful music. I started merchandising, arranging a new display in the window, a collection of colorful, hand-wear-upon scarves from a local artisan, draped over a vintage mannequin. It was a display that spoke of community, of warmth, of authenticity. It was everything her shop was not. I would not let them see me defeated. I would show them I was still here, still fighting. A few days later, a small miracle happened. A woman I didn't recognize, a tourist passing through town, came into my shop. Oh, thank God, she said with a laugh, looking around. I just came from that museum across the street. I was afraid to touch anything. This place feels like a warm hug. She spent an hour browsing, and we chatted easily about her trip. She ended up buying a dress, a scarf, and a pair of earrings. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. You have a really special place here, she said. Don't ever lose that. Her words were a lifeline. She hadn't seen a scorned woman or a failing business. She had just seen my shop for what it was. It reminded me that the opinions of Maple Creek were not the opinions of the entire world. My worth wasn't determined by their judgment. The small victory gave me an idea, a risky, terrifying idea. If the town wouldn't come to me, I would go to them. But not in a way they expected. The annual town charity auction was a few weeks away. It was usually a stuffy affair held in the town hall. People would bid on donated gift baskets and rounds of golf. It was a tradition. And I decided I was going to turn it on its head. I went to the organizing committee and made a proposal. Instead of the usual auction, I wanted to host a fashion show. A real one. The theme would be the real women of Maple Creek. The models wouldn't be professionals. They would be the women of our town. The teachers, the nurses, the bakers, the librarians, women of all ages, shapes, and sizes. They would wear clothes from my shop, and the finale would feature custom-designed dresses that I would make myself. All the proceeds from the ticket sales would go to the town's community fund. The committee was skeptical. It was a radical departure from tradition. But my passion must have been convincing, because after a long debate, they agreed to let me try. The moment the news got out, the pushback began. I heard through the grapevine that Isabel had called it a tacky, amateurish display. Ethan, in his role as a respected community member, publicly questioned whether it was an appropriate use of a charity event. They were trying to poison the well before I had even started. But something unexpected happened. The women I asked to be my models, they said yes. One by one. They agreed. The shy librarian, the boisterous owner of the diner, even Mrs. Gable, who was thrilled at the prospect of being on a runway. They were tired of the drama. They were tired of the negativity. They saw this not just as a fashion show, but as a chance to do something positive, something that brought the community together instead of tearing it apart. My shop transformed into a bustling hub of activity. In the evenings, after closing, it was filled with women laughing and trying on clothes, sharing stories and offering each other encouragement. The energy was electric. It was no longer just my fight. It was ours. We were a small army of ordinary women, getting ready to do something extraordinary. My mother, who had been watching from the sidelines with a worried expression for weeks, finally came around. She walked in one evening to see a dozen women of all ages, shapes, and sizes practicing their runway walks between the clothing racks, cheering each other on. She saw the joy, the camaraderie, the absolute lack of pretense. Her eyes filled with tears. She came over to me, where I was kneeling on the floor, pinning the hem of a dress. She placed a hand on my shoulder. I was wrong. Clara, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I was so worried about what people would think. I forgot to think about you. I am so proud of you. I leaned my head against her hand, a wave of relief washing over me. I finally had my mom back. The night of the fashion show felt like the climax of a movie. The town hall was packed, buzzing with an energy it had never seen before. I stood backstage, my heart pounding in my chest. I peeked through the curtain. I saw Ethan and Isabel sitting in the front row, their expressions a mixture of condescension and curiosity. They had come to watch me fail. The music started. The first model, the shy librarian, walked out onto the runway. She was wearing a beautiful floral dress, and she looked terrified. But then the crowd started to cheer. Not polite applause, but a genuine, heartfelt roar of support. A huge smile broke out on her face, and she walked the rest of the runway with a confidence she never knew she had. One by one, they came out. The baker in a chic jumpsuit, the nurse in an elegant evening gown, Mrs. Gable in a flamboyant feathered coat, absolutely stealing the show. The crowd went wild for every single one of them. This wasn't a show about clothes. It was a celebration of them, of the real, diverse, beautiful women who made up our town. It was a powerful, joyful, and defiant statement. The final part of the show was my turn. I wasn't modeling. I was just supposed to come out and say a few words. As I stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. I looked out at the sea of faces. My friends, my neighbors, and in the front row, I saw Ethan and Isabel. Their faces were no longer smug. They looked stunned. I walked to the microphone, my hands trembling. This was my moment, my chance to tell my story, to expose them, to get my revenge. The crowd grew quiet, waiting. I opened my mouth, ready to let all the anger and pain pour out. I stood at the microphone, the warmth of the stage lights on my face, the expectant silence of the packed town hall pressing in on me. This was it, the perfect opportunity. I could tell them everything. I could describe the shattered cake box on the porch, the secret lies, the calculated cruelty. I could point to Ethan and Isabella in the front row and expose them for the vindictive, hollow people they were. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue. A bitter and satisfying revenge. But as I looked out at the crowd, I didn't just see the faces of those who had doubted me. I saw the proud, beaming faces of the women who had just walked the runway. I saw Mrs. Gable wiping a tear from her eye. I saw my mother, her expression radiating a love so fierce it took my breath away. And standing in the wings, I saw Alex, leaning against the wall, giving me a small, steady nod of encouragement, and I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't a victory. It was just another kind of poison. Talking about them would mean making them the center of my story again. And I was so tired of my story being about them. I took a deep breath and let the angry words dissolve. I chose a different path. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began, my voice clear and strong, resonating through the hall. When I first proposed this idea, some people thought it was a little unconventional. A ripple of laughter went through the audience. But I believed in it, because I believe in the women of this town. We are so often told by magazines and movies what beauty is supposed to look like. We're told to be thinner, younger, richer, quieter. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the room. Tonight, we saw what beauty really looks like. It looks like your neighbor, your teacher, your mother. It's the beauty of strength, of kindness, of resilience. It's the beauty of a community that shows up for each other. I didn't look at Ethan or Isabel. I didn't have to. I could feel their discomfort radiating from the front row. This wasn't the hysterical breakdown they had been expecting. For a while now, I continued, my voice softening slightly. I've been learning some tough lessons about resilience. I learned that sometimes, the people you think will stand by you won't, and the world can feel like a very lonely place. But I also learned that your value isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. Your worth is not up for negotiation. The applause started then, small at first, then growing into a wave of support. And most importantly, I finished, my voice ringing with a newfound conviction. I've learned that you can't control the stories other people tell about you, but you can control your own story. You get to decide if you are the victim, or if you are the hero. Tonight, I am choosing to be the hero of my story, and I want to thank every single one of you for being a part of it. The hall erupted. It was a standing ovation, a roar of approval that shook the floorboards. People were cheering, whistling, crying. It was an overwhelming, cathartic release. Through the sea of clapping hands, I saw Ethan and Isabel. They were the only two people still sitting, their faces frozen in disbelief, in a room full of warmth and connection. They looked small, isolated, and utterly irrelevant. They hadn't come to see me fail. They had come to witness their own defeat. Just as the applause began to die down, a woman stood up from the middle of the audience. I recognized her vaguely. She was a few years older than me. A quiet woman who worked at the county clerk's office. Her name was Sarah. She's right, Sarah called out, her voice trembling but clear. He does it to everyone. A hush fell over the crowd. Every head turned to look at her. Ethan went rigid in his seat. Ethan Hayes, Sarah continued, pointing a shaking finger at him. You did the same thing to me. 5 years ago, when I broke off our engagement because I found out you were cheating. You told everyone I was unstable. You told them I was crazy. You ruined my reputation in this town because you couldn't stand being seen as a bad guy. The silence in the hall was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. It was the final, devastating blow. The truth, not from me, but from another one of his victims. The mask of the charming, beloved teacher was ripped away, and for the first time, the entire town saw the ugly, manipulative man underneath. Isabel looked at Ethan, a horrified expression on her face, as if seeing him for the first time. The man she had allied with was not a tragic hero, but a serial manipulator. Without a word, she stood up, her face pale, and walked quickly out of the hall, leaving him to face the fallout alone. Ethan sat there, frozen, as hundreds of pairs of eyes bored into him, their former admiration now replaced with a cold, dawning understanding. His carefully constructed world had just imploded. I didn't stay to watch the rest. That wasn't my story anymore. I gave a final wave to the cheering crowd and walked backstage, my heart feeling lighter than it had in months. Alex was waiting for me. He didn't say anything. He just handed me a bottle of water, his eyes shining with a quiet pride that meant more to me than the applause of the entire town. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Maple Creek might be slow to change its mind, but once it did, the judgment was absolute. Ethan Hayes became a social pariah overnight. Parents at the high school started calling the principal, expressing concern. His position as a role model was untenable. Within 2 weeks, he quietly resigned from his teaching job. A for sale sign appeared in front of his house not long after. He and Isabel left town separately. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, ignominious whimper of disgraced exiles. Isabel's boutique. The cold, expensive monument to her ego. Never recovered. It had been built on a foundation of spite, not passion. And the town wanted nothing to do with it. It closed its doors less than a month after the fashion show. The glossy black sign a testament to a battle that had been spectacularly lost. My shop, on the other hand, thrived. The Real Women of Maple Creek became an annual event, a new town tradition that I was proud to have started. Clara's Closet was no longer just a store. It was a community hub, a symbol of resilience and authenticity. Women came not just to shop, but to talk, to connect, to feel seen. The business I thought I was going to lose had become more successful than I had ever dreamed. My relationship with my mother healed, becoming deeper and more honest than it had ever been. She finally saw me not as a daughter who needed to be protected and guided into a safe marriage, but as a strong, capable woman who could build her own security, on her own terms. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. The gaping wound in my heart had started to heal, leaving behind a scar that was no longer painful to the touch, but a reminder of the strength I had discovered. I had faced the worst and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, truer to myself than ever before. I had learned that my happiness was not something another person could give me or take away. It was something I had to build myself, from the inside out. Just like my shop. Months melted away, and the quiet peace I had fought so hard for finally felt real. The autumn that had brought so much pain gave way to the quiet blanket of winter, then burst forth into the hopeful green of spring. Life in Maple Creek found its familiar, gentle rhythm again. But something within me, and within the town itself, had fundamentally changed. The whispers of gossip had been replaced by conversations of substance, and the story of my fashion show had become a small-town legend. A tale of how one person's courage could ripple outwards. My friendship with Alex had deepened quietly and naturally over that time. He had finished his work on the shop months ago, but he still found reasons to stop by. Sometimes he'd bring me coffee in the morning, or he'd just pop his head in to say hello on his way to a job site. Our conversations were never forced. We talked about books, about the frustrations of running a small business, about the simple beauty of a perfectly joined piece of wood. He never mentioned Ethan. He never brought up the past. With Alex, I was just Clara, not Clara who Ethan cheated on. He saw the person I was now, not the wreckage I had been. He had a calming presence, a stillness that soothed the parts of my soul that were still jagged and raw. I learned to read his quiet language each way a small smile would touch the corner of his lips. When I told a funny story, the way his clear blue eyes would hold mine for a beat longer than necessary. There was an unspoken understanding between us. A connection that was being built slowly, carefully, on a foundation of mutual respect. There was no rush, no pressure, just a steady, comforting knowledge that he was there. One sunny Saturday afternoon in late spring, I was closing out the shop. The air was warm and smelled of freshly cut grass and lilac blossoms. Alex appeared at the door just as I was about to turn the key in the lock. He was holding something behind his bag. "I have something for you," he said, a rare, shy smile on his face. "You do?" I asked. My curiosity piqued. He brought his hands forward. It was a small, wooden bench, just big enough for two people. It was crafted from the same reclaimed barnwood he had used for my counter. The grain rich and beautiful. The surface sanded to a silken smoothness. It was simple, elegant, and breathtakingly beautiful. I thought the front of the shop looked a little empty. He said, his gaze fixed on the bench, as if he were nervous to look at me. "A place for people to sit, or for the owner to sit." At the end of a long day, I ran my hand over the wood. It was warm from the sun. It was the most thoughtful gift I had ever received. It wasn't flashy or expensive. It was a piece of him, his time, his skill, his quiet care. "Alex, it's perfect," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "Thank you." "You're welcome," he said, finally meeting my eyes. In their clear depths, I saw something that made my heart give a hopeful little flutter. We carried the bench together and placed it on the sidewalk, right next to the shop's front window. It looked like it had always belonged there. "We should test it out," I said, my voice playful. We sat down, a comfortable space between us. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows down Main Street. The town was quiet. We watched as a family walked by, their young daughter stopping to admire the dresses in my window. We sat in a comfortable silence, just enjoying the simple peace of the moment. I was so scared. I said softly, not looking at him, just speaking the truth into the quiet air. For a long time, I thought I'd never feel normal again. I thought he had taken everything from me. Alex didn't reply immediately. He just sat there, a solid, reassuring presence beside me. Then he said, he couldn't take the important stuff. He couldn't take your strength, or your passion. That was yours all along. I turned to look at him then. He was already looking at me. And in that moment, I knew that the scar on my heart had finally, truly healed. The past was no longer a ghost that haunted me. It was just a story. A chapter that was over. And a new one was just beginning. A year after the night that had broken my world, I was a different woman. I was stronger, wiser, and more myself than I had ever been. Clara's closet was more than a business. It was a testament to my survival. And my heart, which I thought had been shattered beyond repair, was slowly, cautiously, opening up again. One evening, as I was sweeping the floor after a busy day, my mother came into the shop. She wasn't fussing or worrying. She was just smiling. A soft, contented look on her face. I saw you and Alex having coffee on your new bench this morning, she said. He's a good man, Clara. A quiet man, but a good one. Yes, he is, I agreed, a smile spreading across my face. You know, she said, picking up a silk scarf and folding it neatly. I spent so many years worrying about you finding a man who could give you security. I never realized that you were perfectly capable of building it for yourself. He's not your security, Clara. He's a bonus. I laughed. A real, happy laugh that filled the shop. I like that. Mom, a bonus. That night, as I locked the shop door, I paused for a moment on the sidewalk. I looked across the street at the empty, dark storefront that had once been Isabel's boutique. It was just a building now, stripped of all its power to hurt me. Then I looked at my own shop, warm and inviting, the lights glowing from within. I ran my hand over the smooth, solid wood of the bench Alex had made for me. My life wasn't the perfect storybook romance I had once thought I wanted. It was something better. It was real. It was a life I had built not from illusions, but from the rubble of a painful truth. I had lost what I thought was everything, only to find the one thing that truly mattered, myself. The bell on the door of the bakery across the street chimed, and I saw Alex coming out, holding a small paper bag. He saw me and smiled. That quiet, wonderful smile that was just for me. He started walking towards me, and I walked to meet him. We met in the middle of the street, under the gentle glow of the Maple Creek streetlights. Two whole people, ready to start a new story, together. And this time, I knew it would be a story built to last.